evolutionary history of laughter and then get into the sort of cognitive neuroscience side of things. Laughter it's a very interesting emotion. Charles Darwin wrote about it a lot in his book about the expression of emotions in man and animals. And he was taking this, one of the first kind of psychological approaches to trying to think about behavior. He was trying to think about ways that some emotional expressions and experiences might have such strong value, be of such utility, that they would actually have a role in evolution. They could be kind of selected for in evolution. So he wrote a lot about things like fear and anger and disgust, but he also talks a lot, and sadness. He also talks a lot about laughter, and he would describe going to London Zoo and watching a zookeeper tickling a baboon and the animal's eyes brightening. It's very beautiful. And it's very interesting because obviously there's been a huge amount of research into how emotions are expressed since then. Well, and a lot of that, fear, anger, disgust, sadness, were emotions that we've taken very seriously in psychology and cognitive neuroscience and neuroscience. And we just sort of ignored the stuff on laughter. If I go into Web of Science and do an emotion, just do a search on the terms emotion, expression, fear, I'll get back it's well over 4,000 papers. If I just switch out fear for laughter, I get back about 400. And a lot of those are case studies of patients where there is involuntary laughter. It can be a sort of a peculiar presentation of Parkinson's disease, for example. So it is clear now that other animals do laugh. Now, Darwin thought that laughter was an expression of joy, the emotional, it was being expressed. And it turns out when people actually started to look for it a bit more seriously, that actually, as much as Darwin had done, laughter in apes is very well described. So this is the late comedian Robin Williams meeting the late signing gorilla Coco. Everybody in my talk is dead. This talk carries a terrible, terrible curse. Okay, if I've cited you, worry. So this is she says tickle me. Tickle me, you said you would. It's very sort of humorless introduction of the topic. And it's hard to tickle a gorilla. I mean, look, it's hard. It's not easy for him to do this. And obviously some film has been edited here, but if she's managing to tickle her here, if you look at her facial expression and her movements, it's very familiar to us as other apes as being very laughter-like. Now, laughter in other apes is different to laughter in humans. It's softer, it's very gentle. You have to be right next to the laughing ape to hear it. It's called the play grunt. It sounds laugh-like sort of sound, but it's not. We kind of broadcast our laughter, and I'll come back to that. Of course, it's not only apes. So the late researcher Jack Panksepp did a lot of work on vocalizations in rats, and he noticed that rats made a very distinct high-pitched vocalization when they were being tickled and when they were playing with each other. And he thought that this was a play vocalization, an invitation to play. And rats use it with considerable complexity. So they're making the sound when it's being tickled. The rat continues making the sound when the person stops tickling them. And if you devocalize a rat so it can't make any sounds at all, it will still play with other rats, and the other rats will want to play with it. They're very social animals. But the devocalized rats, when they're playing with a normal rat, they're more likely to get bitten because they can't make the sound that indicates that their intentions are playful, which is pretty complex for rats. Think about what that might mean for us. So we have this behavior that's been quite well described in primates and in rats. And then Greg Bryant, just go back to this notion of play. Panksepp wrote that he thought that playful intentions are what are being kind of expressed in laughter behaviors in other animals. So play is it's found in all mammals. All mammals play when they're infants. Many of them, like humans and dogs and otters, continue playing their whole lives. It's shown by a few very distinct signs. So there's a play face, which is a loose, open, unthreatening mouth. There's called Freudensprung, where animals in a very stiff-legged way start jumping up and down. And there's some Freudensprung. And in fact, Greg Bryant, still alive in California, he set out to because basically nobody was looking for other animals that might have play vocalizations. And he went out to just try and collect examples of play vocalizations across mammals. And he found them in a lot of sometimes really quite unpromising mammals like cows, also stoats and weasels, but even some non-mammals like keas, these extremely naughty parrots that you find in New Zealand, they have a distinct play vocalization. These are very, very commonly across mammals you find this. So it's potentially the case that there is more laughter out there. If laughter is a playful intentions expression, it may be something that we're actually sharing with many other mammals. So we've got it, the idea of it being joyful expression for Darwin. It's an intention of playful intentions for Panksepp. Now we go to humans. A human vocalization is obviously very, very different from the vocalization of other animals, but it's based on the same principle. Source and filter. You make a sound at your larynx and then you shape it with what's going on up here. No other animal can do it the way that we do. The sheer complexity of the movements that are happening, you can see it better on the side screens. As this woman's talking in the scanner, just running the scanner as a way of imaging the vocal tract. Look at how the tongue is continuously distorting and reshaping, and that's changing the spectral characteristics of the mouth, along with movements of the jaw, the lips, the larynx is moving up and down, the soft palate is moving. Phenomenally complex sound. That is that's actually controlled by a very distinct network that we find very reliably recruited when humans use their voices in a voluntary way, so not simply a reactive noise. And it is largely distinct to humans. We have these lateral motor areas, sensory motor cortex, running down the left and right, sort of central sulcus on either side, very strongly recruited when you're speaking. We also very reliably get a supplementary motor area, we get cerebellum activation, we get subcortical activation, we've got classic inferior frontal regions recruited, we've got posterior auditory fields recruited. That's all driving this unbelievably complex movements that we find associated with talking. When we produce an involuntary vocalization, and laughter can, if you think back to the last time you were laughing and you could not stop, laughter can be a highly involuntary behavior as well. This is that same person laughing in the scanner. And can you see all those fine movements have gone away? Her tongue sitting at the bottom of her mouth. It's not moving at all. Now, this is more like an animal call than it is like speech. She's making sounds just in exactly the same way as a weasel or a cow might. Sound at the larynx, opening the mouth. Now, she's moving up and down a lot because a lot's happening down at her rib cage. She's also, can you see at the back of the mouth there? Can you see there, the pharynx is getting very narrow? If you ever laughed until your throat hurt, it's because you get this narrowing, and that's also causing you to force air out through an even smaller space, and you start producing very high-pitched squeaks and whistles. So that's involuntary laughter. And like other involuntary sounds like screaming or automatically swearing, it's associated with an older midline system that is found in all mammals that is recruited to support vocalizations. So patients who have damaged those lateral motor areas and have an expressive aphasia, they still laugh and cry and swear because they've still got this older, emotional, more reactive system. Now, to cut a long story short, we don't have data on this yet, but I strongly suspect, based on how it's used, in humans, laughter bounces back and forth between these two systems, because sometimes it's completely helpless, but also, very often, as I'll show, it's completely associated with conversation. And conversation is a paradigm example of voluntary use of the voice. And when you laugh in conversation, you do so with incredible precision, and you coordinate it with the people laughing around you. And that looks like the voluntary motor network. So I suspect laughter may be actually involving both of these systems. Now, I said that she was moving a lot because a lot was happening at her rib cage. The rib cage is extremely important in the production of voices, particularly for humans. It's also very important for breathing to stay alive. So what you do with your rib cage, what you're all doing right now, is you use the muscles between your ribs, the intercostal muscles. You contract them and it pulls the rib cage up and out. That creates negative pressure inside the lungs and air is drawn in. Then you relax those same muscles back down and the air, just under elastic recoil, is pushed back out. So if I was to put a breath belt on you right now, I would see this smooth sinusoidal movement. You started doing it the minute you were born, and you'll carry on doing it until the very last things you do will be breathing out. It's very important, don't stop. Now, humans have another completely different use of their rib cages, and that's become possible because we walk upright and we don't need to use our rib cage to support our weight. We're not using our forelimbs to walk on. And this actually makes human speech possible. So when we're talking, instead of breathing this metabolic way, like at the top, we take a breath in, and then we use those same intercostal muscles to very finely control the flow of air out through the larynx, the voice box. And what you're actually doing is maintaining what's called a constant subglottal pressure at the larynx. And that's giving you the pitch and the rhythm of your voice, but it's also giving you the ability to talk in sentences. If I keep talking without taking another breath, I have to work really hard. And one of these days, I'm either going to urinate or pass out at the end of that, but I think we're good. And you're probably thinking, well, Sophie, that was very interesting, but very weird. Why did you do it? We can only talk at all because we can do this. If we couldn't breathe this way, we would speak on each exhalation. It would be absolutely exhausting. So actually, that's what's giving us sentences. It's the sort of the unit for speech. The rhythm of speech cycle is based around breath. You can predict how long somebody is going to speak for by how large a breath they take at the start of an utterance. So it's part of your speech planning cycle. It's extremely important and we need to pay more attention to it. But there is another thing that happens at the rib cage, which is laughter. And laughter is associated with very, very big, very fast deflections of those same muscles. Now that's giving you a really basic way of making a sound. Each one of those deflections is just squeezing air out of you. We don't know why, but if laughter is involuntary, it will come out. It will stop you breathing. It will stop you talking. It's just squeezing air out of you. It's trying to kill you in some ways. And it is a relatively dangerous activity. You do raise the pressure in your thoracic cavity when you are laughing to a degree that means you can, and people have, don't stop, but people have died laughing. Now, on a less extreme example, what this means is, assuming somebody's not dead at the end of it, when somebody starts laughing, what you're hearing is often, not always, but often, that an involuntary motor network fighting with and then winning a competition with the voluntary motor network. That's particularly the case if they don't want to laugh. So this is an example of Charlotte Green talking on the Today programme. She's going to read the news headlines and she hears something that makes her laugh. This is the pictures of people's voices down here. You'll notice after a while she starts to lose control over the pitch of her voice, and that's the laughter starting to get in there. That fine subglottal pressure control is going. And then the pitch of her voice shoots right up and she starts making squeaking noises, even though she stopped talking, because now she's fully laughing and she's desperately trying not to. So that's what this sounds like.
With the Army's popular chief of the staff, Jack Swatt, taking over.
A 40-foot sperm whale, which was stranded in the Circle Port for more than 4 days, is now thought to be swimming towards open waters again. It freed itself late last night. Marine experts are hoping to establish this morning whether the whale is coming back at sea.
If you work with voices, this is just such a fantastic clip because the man coming down the line has got to say the name Jack Twat. And I don't know about you, I come from Blackburn in Lancashire and you would not just say twat on the radio. It's pretty full on. And he just goes for it. Nothing to see here. Popular Chief of Staff, Jack Twat. And back in the studio, and significantly, she is not on her own. Somebody leans over to Charlotte Green. You can only really hear this if you listen very carefully, and they whisper something at her. And what they whisper is, Jack Twat. They're trying to make her laugh. And at first, she's okay. She's fine. The whale in the fourth is doing all right. And then you start to hear this collapse of the control of the pitch. And then finally back at sea, she's almost completely lost speech. She's desperately trying not to. The BBC hate their newsreaders and their sports presenters showing emotion in their voices. It's called breaking, and she'll get in trouble for it. This is the power of that involuntary vocalization. She cannot stop it once it's started. And at the end, as I say, so even after she stopped talking, she's carried on making noises. Now, laughter in humans has some interesting, unusual characteristics. First of all, it's behaviorally contagious. Now, humans have, and in fact, across nature, behavioral contagion is relatively common in social animals. So yawning is common. You find it in social animals like humans and chimpanzees and dogs. You also find it in budgerigars, which are small parrots, and you find it in some turtles. So that's Robert Provine, sadly passed away a few years ago. He did a lot of work into behavioral contagion, and he thought it's a low-cost affiliative sign, because across most animals where you find behavioral contagion, you're much more likely to catch a behaviorally contagious phenomenon from another animal that you know than someone that you don't. That's true for dogs with yawning. That's true for chimpanzees with yawning. It's true for humans with yawning. So it's got this strong affiliative element. Also, it's learnt. So babies don't show any contagious behaviours. We teach babies to do these things. And again, it seems to be like a low-cost affiliative behaviour. Many things work this way. So scratching is contagious for us. It's contagious for orangutans. Orangutans scratch themselves when they're nervous. And other orangutans will join in going, yeah, mate, I know. It's a bit worrying, you know. So it's not, you know, the meaning doesn't have to, we don't find scratching to be a sign of nerves, but we still do it. When somebody you know starts scratching themselves, you will join in. Now, this is background to the fact that there is one behavior that humans do that is highly contagious for humans. We learn to do it. It's social. We do it more from someone we know than someone we don't know. And you do not find it in other animals, even other apes, and that's laughter. And we ran into this the first time I did a study with Disa Sota and Jane Warren years ago. As Jamie says, most of the research I do is really boring stuff on sort of speech and hearing. And I was just interested because we were starting to work with these non-verbal emotional vocalizations. What would happen if we scanned the brain listening to those rather than speech? And one thing that we found that was really striking was we've got loads of orofacial mirror activation. This is in the heyday of the mirror system, you know, excitement of the early noughties. And in fact, we redesigned the study and ran it again, including a motor localizer, so we really could look for orofacial mirror activation. And people here were listening to emotional sounds like screams of fear, disgusted sounds, triumphant cheering sounds, and laughter. And interestingly, not only we were seeing much more orofacial mirror activation, shown in green at the top, than we ever see to speech, it was also associated with different degrees of it, with different kinds of emotions. So it's strongly correlated with how positive the sounds were and how arousing they are, which meant in practice, we were getting a large amount of this kind of orofacial mirror activation for laughter and hardly anything for disgust. And that was interesting because we then ran into the behavioural contagion literature, and well, possibly that's what we're seeing here. Now, behavioural contagion, once you're an adult, is extremely strong. It's very, very hard. You don't even notice that you're doing it. If you're with someone who starts laughing and you know them, there's a very strong chance that you too will start laughing. And if you ask people while they're laughing, they'll talk about why something's funny, but actually it's just contagion. So I've got an example of this here. I've got two men who are doing a broadcast in America. It's a religious broadcast, so not one where we would normally start laughing helplessly at the people calling in. The man on the right hears something that makes him laugh and he starts laughing. The man on the left is really worried about this. It's looking bad, it's going to be rude, but he also keeps laughing and smiling, just under, I suspect, behavioural contagion, because these are two men that know each other and work together.
We're trying to get out there.
He's already trying not to laugh. Worried. Holding it together, worried. Oh, something's happening. Real look of concern coming up now. Look at that. Worried. Why is he worried? Look, smile, laugh.
And we want to give you a t-shirt.
So I always think I can stop that earlier, and no, I've got to get. I'm not the same. So basically two different forms of laughter are happening there. One is completely helpless and involuntary, and the other is just happening through this behavioural contagion. And just to zoom out for a bit, one of the other things that Robert Provine wrote a lot about was about the nature of laughter, and he thought that laughter, unlike if you ask people, when do you laugh? They talk about jokes and comedy. They talk about humor. But if you look at people and you look at when they laugh, you find that primarily laugh purely for social reasons. So you are 30 times more likely to laugh if there's somebody else with you than if you're on your own. And if anything, we found that to be an underestimate. It's still a marker of these basic animal characteristics. So we laugh to show that we're playing. Children laugh to show their intentions are playful. Adults laugh to show that their intentions are playful. My partner and my son like to pretend to murder each other on every photograph I ever take of them. And they could just look very dark. It were not for the fact that they laugh all the time when they're doing it. Everybody laughs more than they think they do. So there are very few studies on laughter, but the studies that there are, for example, people have looked at ask people how often they laugh, and then look at how often they laugh, and everybody is laughing more than they think they are. Ceci Kai, my PhD student who now works with Sarah White at the ICN, she and I and Marie Muller put together a questionnaire basically trying to get to people's experiences of laughter. And one of the two things that really came out strongly from this, two strong factors, are how often people think they laugh, the frequency of their laughter, and how much they like laughter. The other factors are to do with understanding your laughter and other people's laughter. And we tried to validate the questionnaire. Does this in any way predict people's behavior? So what we found was that if you look at when people are laughing with a friend, you did get a relationship between one of those measures and how often people laugh when they're in a conversation with a friend, which is where you find laughter happening. But it's not the frequency of laughter, it's how much they like laughter. So people who like laughter do laugh more, not the people who say they laugh a lot. We have a different measure of how much people laugh when they're on their own, and everybody laughs much less often when they're on their own. Now that correlates positively with with the measures of liking. So liking is also associated with laughing more on your own, but it does also correlate with frequency. So maybe when people think about how often they laugh, they're not thinking about social situations, they're thinking about when they're on their own. I don't know, we need to know more about this, but the important thing is people are very bad reporters on their own laughter. Do not believe any study that says things like children laugh 6 million times a day and adults laugh just twice, because none of those people, the children or the adults, is accurately telling you anything about their laughter. It's hugely modified by social context. So the more you know people, the more you like people, the more that you will laugh when you're with those people. It's a very important way of forming intimacy. We use it to make and maintain social bonds. And Robin Dunbar has found that if you can get people laughing, they will tell you more intimate things about themselves. They feel closer to you. It is modulated by culture. So all cultures, as far as we can see, laugh, but they will laugh differently to different amounts. So a study found that if you look just across the world at countries with higher levels of historic migration, i.e. just with more movements through of people with different languages and different cultural backgrounds, they are parts of the world where you find more laughter and more smiling, and the laughter and smiling is less ambiguous. And the argument is, if you can't assume that you share a language with everybody you meet, non-verbal social emotions like laughter and smiling, these sort of positive expressions of affiliation, become a lot more important. People will laugh to show that they're okay. It's possible this man didn't want to be covered in yellow paint by people he works with, but he's laughing to show that he's in on the joke. And actually, this is an extremely common use of laughter. People will use laughter in stressful situations to try and deal with that stress. And it works. It only works if everybody laughs. If one person's laughing, if I went round to a friend's house and I dropped a glass of red wine on their white carpet and I was going, oh, we just need some salt. And they were going, well, I think I've got some in the kitchen then. I would not feel better. No one would feel more relaxed about the situation. If they joined in, we'd all be okay. This is just a clip from a very famous occasion where Boris Yeltsin was haranguing the foreign press after a meeting with Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton basically just waits for the first opportunity he has to behave as if Boris Yeltsin has said something funny, which is actually literally his own name. Boris Yeltsin said, I came to meet Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton goes, that's me. And then from that point onwards, he behaves as every single thing that Boris Yeltsin says is funny. And the press corps start laughing. And in the end, Boris Yeltsin's like, I am hilarious. And what was an extremely stressful situation has been very, very strong, extremely gamed by somebody who had the status to be able to do it, but it was successful. What all this means in practice is that most laughter lives in conversation. And in conversation, you can be laughing for so many different reasons. You can be laughing just contagiously. You can be laughing to make a social bond with somebody new or to strengthen one with someone you already know. People will laugh to show agreement and understanding. They'll laugh to show recognition. They'll laugh to show yes, I do remember when that happened. And she probably would say that, wouldn't she? It's an extremely important use of human communication, actually, is communicative laughter. And it also means that laughter is never neutral. When you hear somebody laughing, particularly if they're laughing in one of these really communicative ways, it's like a hall of mirrors. Why are they laughing? Are they laughing because they like someone? Are they laughing because they're with someone that they don't even know they like, but the laughter's still expressing it? They're laughing because they're stressed. Are they laughing to mask another emotion? We will laugh to cover up other emotions like fear and anger and embarrassment and pain. So you're always trying to work out what's going on when somebody's laughing. A few years ago with Carolyn McGettigan, we did a study. This is actually because we were interested in this issue around kind of authenticity when people express emotions. Been fiddling around with stuff collected in the lab for years. And I thought, well, no one's going to care if we make people laugh in the lab, really make them laugh. So we did whatever it took to make each other laugh in the anechoic chamber. Best day ever in the anechoic chamber. Not normally much fun. And we ended up with a set of laughs from people where they were either laughing in a truly involuntary way or they were laughing in a more social way, like laughing because your friends told a joke and you're laughing because you like your friend. So I've got two different kinds of laughs for you here. I want you to tell me if you think this is an involuntary laugh or a more kind of communicative laughter. Sounds involuntary. That's my laugh. I've got a really high-pitched laugh. I'd love to be able to sing up there. Couldn't get up there to save my life. How about this one? See, people always laugh more to that one. It's really interesting. So yeah, that's somebody posing a laugh, and more kind of communicate. They're laughing at some level in a voluntary way. Now they're acoustically different. The spontaneous laughs are longer, they're higher in pitch. You get funny squeaks and whistles. But interestingly, Nadine Levan, who worked with us on this, she spotted that the kind of communicative laughs are a lot more nasal. Certainly the ones we collected in the UK, the kind of quality to them. And you couldn't do that if you were laughing spontaneously. People are sort of marking their laughter. I'm giving you this laughter because it's generally, on the whole, meant in a positive way. I want you to know that I'm laughing for you. We took these stimuli into the scanner and we didn't tell people it was a study on laughter, and we didn't tell them there was spontaneous emotion in there or posed emotion. And we put in lots of other sounds to try and put them off the hint, sorts of disgust sounds and other funny noises. It doesn't matter. And it's also completely passive, so they're just listening. There's no task here. The brain is processing the two sounds differently. So you get a lot more auditory activation to the spontaneous laughter, possibly because you hear sounds you don't hear in any other context. They are odd, they are weird and high-pitched. You also get a lot more activation to that more conversational laughter, which I didn't think we'd find. I thought there'd be, because the real laughter sounds like the sun coming out, there would just be more activation. No, but you're getting a kind of classic theory of mind areas. You're getting medial prefrontal cortex, you've got getting the anterior thalamus. So it looks like when people are hearing somebody clearly laughing in a communicative way, are they laughing because they want someone to like them? Are they laughing to try and cover up being embarrassed? There's a lot of different reasons why this voluntary action is happening, and you're trying to work it out. Interestingly, we got that same orofacial mirror response that we saw before, and I thought it was going to be greater to the spontaneous laughter than to the sort of conversational laughter, because everybody rates the spontaneous laughter as more contagious. And that's not what we found. What we get is orofacial mirror activation to any laugh. But the thing that makes a difference actually is across participants. We took people out the scanner and then we gave them a test where they had to classify the two different kinds of laughs. And what we find is the more accurate they are at doing that, the more they'd recruited orofacial mirror regions when they heard any laugh. So it's not just contagion. if you're getting ready to join in when you hear laughter, you are understanding it better. And this is interesting because, of course, it also suggests there might be interesting individual variation here. People are varying a lot on our questionnaire in how they react to and think about laughter. We had the opportunity to work with Essie Vidding and on this study with boys, teenage boys at risk of psychopathy. And she was doing a lot of different tests with them in the scanner, but they also had a short bit where they listened to 2 different kinds of laughs. And what we find is that out of the scanner, they rate the laughter as less contagious than the teenage boys who are not at risk of psychopathy. And they also show a reduced orofacial mirror response. And I'm not saying psychopathy is a problem of laughter, but I am saying laughter is a social emotion that lives in interactions with other people. And we know that contagion is something that is learned. So if these boys have either never had the opportunity to learn to laugh contagiously, or something about them means they haven't learned that, they can't learn that, imagine the sorts of interactions that they're having with people where you can't use laughter to make and maintain a social bond, to show agreement and understanding, to do all the other kind of complex, heavy lifting of emotional interactions that we frequently use laughter for. And even just to feel close to other people. And finally, laughter makes things funnier. We did this study where we added added laughter onto the ends of really bad jokes, and I mean stinkers. What's the best day for cooking? Friday. And people rate the jokes as funnier if you add laughter onto the end, and the more spontaneous the laughter, the funnier it makes the joke. We didn't know why this was happening. It was just an interesting finding. So we took it into the scanner. Here we couldn't use jokes because the jokes are too long. We used funny words. There's a fantastic database of words that have been rated as funny. Words like bebop and flank. And what we find is, behaviourally, if you add laughter onto the end of those words, people rate them as funnier. In the scanner, this is showing you the activation that is greater for words plus laughter than words plus signal correlated noise analogues of speech. So something that's got the amplitude envelope of speech, of these not emotional sounds, but it doesn't sound like laughter, it doesn't sound like a vocalization. And it's interesting because you're seeing a lot of brain areas you would expect to see associated with speech perception and laughter perception that I've shown you, and also those kind of mirroring responses. But also we get loads more visual activation and sort of medial, I'm blanking on the name, but the brain areas associated with recall, memory and imagery, which are activated when you are hearing the laughter following a word, but you don't get when it's just the word on its own. And I've done years of studying speech perception and semantic systems, and you don't routinely see these brain areas. This is more than just hearing speech. This is so when you're hearing the laughter, it seems to be triggering both contagion effects, but it's also triggering you to think more about the words, what they look like, why might flank be funny, and sort of drawing that together into sort of imagery about how this could possibly be a funny thing somebody else might laugh at. Let's skip over those. So there's a really nice quote from Victor Borgia, and I know I'm saying that wrong, sorry, but laughter is the shortest distance between two people. And I've always liked that because it's getting this idea of intimacy. And it may be even more important than that. So there's work from Robert Levinson, still alive, where he's been in this longitudinal study with the local community, couples in his local community for decades, gets them into the lab, stresses them out by asking them to talk about a problem in their marriage. Imagine doing that. And what he finds is everybody gets stressed as measured on a polygraph by that particular task. The couples who deal with it with what he calls positive affect, but he means laughter, are the ones who not only immediately get less stressed, you can measure the difference, they're also the couples who are happier and they stay together for longer. And it's not because laughter is a bit of magic that makes everything okay, because it only works if both members of the couple laugh. So there's something about sharing the laughter that is actually enabling people to negotiate their way to a better mood. So it's not the laughter that's making things better. The laughter is an index of a relationship where people can find a way of coping with stress together. So I think it's worth taking laughter more seriously. I think if we think back to the kind of emotion that's being expressed when we laugh, Darwin thinks it's joy, Panksepp thought it was an invitation to play. And I think the main thing we've learned since Darwin's work is the intense social nature of this. So if it is a joy, it's a social joy. It's a joy you experience when you're with other people. And we use that in an extremely complex way that really is worth finding out more about. Thank you very much.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. Time for questions. I can see